Previously on Sudrian Conflict. Alfred Herman ordered that all Sudrian men work for him. Later, he invited the entire blockade committee to a football game that turned out to be less friendly than had been anticipated. That evening, Phil Ardman had a talk with Alfred Herman, which ultimately led to the realization that Alfred Herman and Adolf Hitler were one in the same. Then he shot Phil in the shoulder and left him to die. And now, the next installment. Poor Bertram. He's been in there for weeks. They've made no effort to dig him out at all. It's like they don't even know he's there. Oh, I liked Bertram. He kind of reminded me of an engine I used to know. Can't place the name. It was on my old railway, mid-Sodor. Stewart, do you remember the name? Grandpuff, I've told you 100 times. My name is not Stewart, okay? It's Peter Sam now. What was that engine's name? Wasn't it like Stanley or... do you remember him? I think he was red. Or maybe blue. Or green. Definitely red or blue or green. Grandpuff, I don't know the engine you're thinking of. Oh, is Duke enchanting us with another of his marvelous stories? No, we're playing Duke Libs. It's the game where he gives me no information to go off of and I'm supposed to guess the engine he's thinking of. Oh, come on, Falcon, you know this one. That's not even the wrong name. My fellow Dazels, I find it imperative that you know of the intolerance that is facing us. Steam engines hate diesel engines. We're treated like second-class citizens on this railway. My friends, if we do not rise up and do something about this, the steam engines will crush us. We are hated, berated, trivialized, and laughed at. But if we are able to team up and come together, perhaps we can put a stop to all of this. Diesel, I don't really know if I buy all of this that you're talking about. I mean, you seem pretty sure of yourself. How do you know if this is going to happen? How do I know? I've lived it firsthand. And so has a friend of mine. Yeah, I could tell you some stories. Pinchy and I have been on this railway a lot longer than a lot of you. I've picked up a couple of stories in my day. Let me tell you what those steamers really think of you. Henry felt dreadfully ill. Oh, he moaned. I suffer dreadfully and no one cares. Workmen tried day and night to fix Henry, but it was no use. The noise from Henry's repairs kept the other engines up at night, and as a result the Fat Controller had to build Henry his own shed. One frosty winter's morning, the Fat Controller arrived with a surprise for Henry. Henry, I know you haven't been feeling well lately, but if you are able to build up steam this evening, I have arranged for you to pull the flying kipper. Oh, sir, thank you. I'll try my hardest, said Henry. That evening, he sat proudly on the turntable in front of the other engines before triumphantly puffing away to pull the flying kipper. The other engines were very proud of their old friend. The next morning, the Fat Controller came to the sheds with bad news. Henry has had an accident, he began. Ice and snow caused him to derail while pulling the kipper. But all is not lost. He is being sent away to Crewe for an overhaul. It's a fine place for sick engines. He'll return better than he's been feeling in years. The engines were ecstatic. His overhaul is expected to take a few months, so in the meantime I have arranged for a diesel to come in and work for Henry. This was met with a less than favorable response. A few days later, the diesel arrived. He strolled in quietly and surveyed the shed. Not bad. I've seen worse. At least you're all clean. The engines glared at him. It's really not your fault, but the Fat Controller ought to scrap you and get more engines like me. A fill of oil, a touch on the starter, and I'm off. They have to fuss around with you for hours. The engines were furious, and the diesel casually found his way to Henry's shed and had a rest after his long journey from the mainland. A few days later, the diesel had a train to pull. He purred quietly in his shed, and an inspector watched as a fitter made final adjustments. The wind gently tugged at his bowler hat. The diesel began to purr triumphantly out of his shed, and then it happened. The engines grinned as the diesel broke down. I don't understand, this never happens. Eventually, the diesel had to be shunted back into his shed. "There's my hat! You sucked it in through your air intake," called the inspector. And he had. The diesel was stuck in the shed and watched as Duck set off to pull the train instead. The diesel, feeling quite embarrassed of himself, had his shed door shut. He left behind only two things: a rather dreadful smell and a battered bowler hat. Spring came to the island of Sodor, and with it brought new changes, such as the addition of the private engine of the Duke and Duchess of Boxford, known as Lady. Don't you get sick of it? Sick of what? The way they treat us around here, you know what I mean? The favoritism towards steam engines. I'm getting really sick of the way they treat that lady. There's nothing special about her, and they love her. Doesn't it make you cross? No, I don't have a problem with anyone. I like it here. I don't think there's an issue at all. I think if anyone has a problem here, it's you, and if you'll excuse me, I have to be going now. I really need to finish my work. Oh, come on. Don't you see the way they look at her? I mean, have they ever given you that kind of attention? That's because Lady is polite and kind. I'm just a shunter. I don't expect admiration. I just do my job. Well, I guess you're betting for the other side. Yep, that's right. Goodbye now. A few weeks later, there was a terrible storm on Sodor. The next morning, the engines surveyed the damage. Broken branches lay everywhere. Sir Topham had arrived. He seemed sort of off and wobbly. Due to the storm, I have arranged for an engine to come to Sodor and help clean up. It is a diesel engine from an Irish logging railway. This engine has a special attachment that helps him clean up branches. I hope you all make him feel very welcome. Goodbye now. When the new diesel arrived, the diesel was the first to greet him. Hi there, you're the new diesel, aren't you? Why, yes I am. And hello to you too, what's your name? The diesel smiled. That was the first time anyone had asked him his name since he came to Sodor. My name's Andy. You? Well, they call me 10. I've never been given a proper name. Really? Wow. Yeah, but I do like to call my little hydraulic claw here Pinchy. That's great. Pinchy. That's what I'll call you. Over the next few weeks, the Diesels became close friends. Eventually, they both knew that 10 was due back in Ireland, so Andy came up with a plan. You know, Pinchy, don't you get tired of seeing the way they treat that lady engine? You know, like she's all that. Yeah, I do. I mean, we're just as good as she is, right? What makes her so special? Right then. Hey, I got a plan. I'm due up in the quarry mine in half an hour. I was thinking maybe if I, fake a little engine troubles, then I could get her to replace me. Then you follow her up there and, whatever happens, happens. And the two engines sat together and schemed for a long time until they had the whole plan completely worked out. Then, right on cue, Andy mysteriously broke down, and Lady was dispatched to fill in for him. Lady could not have heard the sound of 10 quietly purring up behind her. Making use of his hydraulic claw, he grabbed a hold of her backless cab and lifted her wheels off the ground. Then he surged forwards, throwing her off the front of the cliff face and into the ocean waters below. Are you certain of this?
Yes, sir. I know what I saw.
Well, I guess we got away with it.
Uh-oh.
You there, would you allow me to speak with Tan in private? Yeah, sure. What'd he say?
Yeah, some workmen reported it. I'm off the island by tomorrow.
The next day, Ten was off the island, and Andy was alone on Sodor once more. He tried many times, speaking to many different diesels, attempting to restart some sort of revolution, but it was never successful. And then, one day in July, Sir Topham Hatt told him that Henry was due to return any day and that his services would no longer be needed soon. Andy left the island of Sodor, feeling that he had failed to accomplish his goal. A few days later, Henry finally returned. He puffed up proudly to the turntable, displaying his new shape for all the engines to see. As he reversed into his old shed, the engines took solace in knowing that Sodor was finally back to normal. In recent days, the number of workmen in the blockade committee had dropped significantly. As a result, Simon was scrambling to find his footing once more. At last, he hatched a grand plan that would kill a great many birds, but with one stone.
Hey, Simon? Have you seen Phil Ardman around here recently?
Who?
He was the other guy who stayed behind yesterday. I haven't seen him since yesterday.
Look, buddy, I don't remember these guys by name, alright? They're just people to me. Maybe you're mistaken or something. They're kind of hard to tell apart, really. Gentlemen, I have recognized that there is a new threat that faces us that may be even greater than Alfred Herman himself. This threat is none other than the Duke and Duchess of Boxford. These sycophantic monsters have been living on this island out of the generosity of Sir Topham Hatt for years, but he is gone now, and I say that we kill them and seize their assets. Who's with me?
I don't know if I really want to.
It was then that Simon decided to employ an old trick he learned from Reverend Laxey. Come on, everyone. Slit their throats, spill their blood, kill the Duke and Duchess. Come on. Slit their throats, spill their blood, kill the Duke and Duchess. Slit their throats, spill their blood, kill the Duke and Duchess. Slit their throats, spill their blood, kill the Duke and Duchess. Slit their throats, spill their blood, kill the Duke and Duchess. Slit their throats, spill their blood, kill the Duke and Duchess. Slit their throats, spill their blood, kill the Duke and Duchess. Lars stood behind, bewildered beyond belief. He was even further surprised when several men returned and disappeared behind the Sodor steamworks. They returned a few minutes later, having found a guillotine. Shortly after, the rest of the blockade committee returned, having abducted the Duke and Duchess of Boxford from their summer home. The Duke was led to the guillotine first. The Duchess was forced to stay behind, and her hair was crudely tied up,